So this is a fun one. I'm going to put an MP3 player inside an original Nintendo controller. And this is a knockoff, but I'm going to wire up the buttons so that these buttons control the MP3 player. So I'm making an MP3 player that looks like a Nintendo controller. This isn't my idea or anything. I've seen other people do it, and I've actually done this before. You have to cut holes for everything on the MP3 player, all the interfaces. So there's an SD card slot and a USB port and a power switch. And this, I like this part. You put the headphone jack right there, so that when you plug it in or plug headphones into it, it looks like just the cable that comes out of the top of a controller. I like that. I wired up on this one. I wired up the buttons so that the up and down control the volume, and you do the track with left and right. And then the A button is the play button or the play pause button, and that's it. There's only the 5 buttons on this cheap MP3 player. So I've done it, but I want to make another one, and I want to make it different. I want to make the A button. I want the B button to be play and pause, and I want to try and make the A button be the power switch, the power button, so that more of the buttons do something. I wish there was something I could wire up to select and start, but that way more of the buttons will do something, and it'll just be a little bit cleaner. It's hard to make a good-looking hole for the power switch. This isn't bad or anything. It's just the fewer things I can have on there, the better it'll look. I'm even tempted to, so this SD card slot, this MP3 player doesn't have any memory inside it, any storage inside it, so you have to have a micro SD card to have any songs on it. And I'm tempted to just put the card in and then just seal it up like that, and not even have a hole for putting an SD card in it. It would look nicer if I did that, but I'm not going to do that because I don't want to take features away from an already not very many. There's not very many features on this to begin with, so I'm just going to maintain what I can. This MP3 player doesn't even have a shuffle function, so it doesn't do much, and you should be advised if you're planning on doing this that these cheap MP3 players they can't shuffle. These are super cheap. You can buy these for just a couple of bucks. This is the kind of thing that companies buy them to. They buy them in bulk and then have their company name put on it, and then hand them out as swag at conferences and stuff. So they're cheap, and they're actually kind of cheaply made, but they're good for projects like this. And that's kind of what makes this a good project. This is a knockoff controller and a cheap MP3 player. So even if you catastrophically destroy everything, you're only out, $8 or $9 tops to replace everything. And another good thing that I like about this, wow, this one's fully exposed. This is a bad unit to begin with, but there's 5 wires, as you can see, inside this cable. So after you cut this cable out to use the rest of the controller, you can use this wire for other projects, and that's the wire that we're going to use on the inside of our controller MP3 player. Ooh, before I take apart the MP3 player, check this out. Alright, I've taken these apart. The MP3 player doesn't have any screws in it or anything. You just have to kind of stick a screwdriver in and yank it apart. Here's the membranes for the buttons. They're on this sticky piece. So now here's our contacts that we can solder to, and as long as we bridge those 2 points, if you can see that, there's sort of an inner circle and an outer ring, and when you bridge those, which is what these pieces of metal do, they kind of snap and bridge those two together. That's what pushes the button. So we just wire up traces on here so that when we push these buttons and bridge these 2 points, we just wire them over and bridge these points, and that will work the buttons. This board has a good common ground across all the buttons, meaning that you don't have to wire 2 wires for each button. You just wire one in the ground. They all share a ground, so you'd wire the one ground from this board to the one ground on the MP3 player, and then 1 wire per button, and it works just fine. So right now I'm going to cut the cable and harvest the wire from it, And then I'm going to desolder the headphone jack and cut holes for the USB port and the SD card slot. Luckily they're all both on this same side so that I can just mount it right there. I'll Dremel did this post down and just mount it right there so that I don't have to relocate those at all. I have to desolder them. And then I'll cut those holes. So what I've done here is I went ahead and hot glued the MP3 player to the inside of the controller, just temporarily. Hot glue comes right off, so that I had this side cut for the USB port, and I wanted to glue it there just to make it a little bit easier to hold up the other side to make sure that it was the right size. I don't like this part. I don't like cutting plastic. It's boring. And it's just a game of making slightly more cuts, just make the hole just a little bit bigger until it's just the right size. And this hole's not very good, but I tried to go really slow and patient, but I rushed it just a little bit. This hole for the headphone jack is just a little bit too small, so you have to sand it a little bit with sandpaper. I harvested these wires from the cable that came out of it. There's 5 in the middle, and you just kind of cut the length you want, and then cut away the black, I don't know what to call it, the black outer layer, and it's not attached at all. They just slip right out. And then I went ahead and tinned these wires so that they're ready to go, and I desoldered the headphone port jack, and I went ahead and soldered some wires to it and put some hot glue here to secure them a little bit so that they're ready to mount on the inside of the controller and then wire to the spots where they came from, where the jack used to be. So the next step is to take this off, and then here, let me go ahead and do that. Alright, got it off, and I removed all my hot glue blobs. So the next step is to decide the points on here that I want to solder to. So I need to determine, it's easy to find the ground trace, but I need a trace for each of these buttons, and I can't just solder right exactly to where they press to, because there has to be this pad right here. So I have to do something that's outside of it, but all these traces kind of lead over to the right there. Select and start. You just kind of have to pick spots to do it, and that are outside of the area where the pads are. So you have to kind of put all the pads there as if you're about to close it up, so that you can see what you have available to you. And then the different one's going to be the B button. So here I've got my toggle switch. That's just a button that I want to be behind the B button. So I'm going to have to actually drill a hole straight through there so that this is what's behind the B button. And it really helps to actually draw this out on a piece of paper so that you can see which traces, because it packs them all really tightly all together right there, and so you need to be able to see or keep track which trace goes to which button, and then which color of wire you're using, so that you don't mess it up when you wire it to the MP3 player. And something that I did not do, I guess I could still hold this up, is keeping track of which button actually does which function, but that looks like the track buttons and the volume buttons. So there's that. So I'm going to do that. I'm going to map these out, and then what you do is you scrape away. So this is all green. You scrape away some of this mask to reveal the copper trace underneath, and then you solder straight to that. So that's what I'm going to do next. Here's my beautiful diagram. Hopefully you can see how it kind of corresponds to the traces that you can see visible behind these or between these pads. And obviously it doesn't have to be pretty, just to show you which traces go to which buttons, and the up, right, down, and left, that's the order that they go in. And so I've gone ahead and assigned colors to those, to the wires that I'm using, white and yellow, brown and red, so that when I'm attaching them to this board, I can just look at the color and see where it is. Not that you can't retrace it, it's just faster to have a nice diagram all set out. That's how I like to do it. And then if you can see, I've scraped away those traces, or the mask on the traces, to expose the copper. And you have to be careful when you are soldering wires to those that you do it so that the wires are lying in a way that they won't obstruct these silicon pads. So either down the bottom, maybe I'll do pointing down the bottom for these ones and up and over for those ones. That one, I might have to make that one bigger. The A button's easier because on this board at least it gives me a nice solder pad to solder to. So I'll just use that. And I should write down what color I'm using for that too, but that'll be easier to tell. And for the B button, I'm just going to drill a hole right there where the B button makes contact and put my toggle switch in there. So I'll go ahead and make those, go ahead and solder the wires, and then that way we can test it to make sure that the buttons are activating the correct functions.